Hi, this is Paul LaMonica, and welcome to the West Haven Virtual Ghost Tour. This is the first in a series of ghostly tales about our town, West Haven, Connecticut. Now, West Haven's history goes back to the very founding of our nation, so it's not surprising that there are eerie tales and scary stories abounding. Our first story goes back to 1646 and centers on New Haven Harbor, and it is called the Ghost Ship of New Haven. So this is New Haven Harbor in today, present day. But I want you to go back in your mind's eye to 1646, Puritan New Haven. Stern men with belt buckle hats and women in bonnets. New Haven Colony, which includes West Farms, which is West Haven, is a scary place to live. First of all, you are in the middle of the wilderness. If there's a crop failure, there is no help coming in time. You're surrounded by hostile Native Americans who the Puritans believe might go off and eat your children. You're surrounded by marauding French trappers who might take your daughters back to Montreal and make them Catholic. But the scariest thing in Puritan New Haven is how the Puritans thought about God and the devil. God was in the middle of your lives and he was angry most of the time. And the devil was in the middle of your lives and you might run into him on the way home from work. If the devil wasn't in your life, he very well might be in your next door neighbor's life. So if your cow died, you had to decide, did my cow die because God was mad at me because I like milk too much? Or did my cow die because my neighbor was mad at me about where I put my fence and he's in league with the devil? And he and the devil put a hex on my cow. You're scared of God, you're scared of the devil, you're scared of your neighbors, and you're pretty much scared of everything else. No wonder that years later, a different group of Puritans in Salem, Massachusetts, started hanging their neighbors as witches. Now, 1646, New Haven is 8 years old, and it's having money problems. Now, anybody who knows the history of New Haven and the history of West Haven should not be surprised that it only took 8 years to have money problems. I'm surprised it actually took them that long. In 1646, the problem centers on shipping. New Haven doesn't have any. They've got goods to sell. They have people in London who want to buy it, but to get the goods from New Haven to London, they've got to go through Boston, and the Boston merchants are charging them an arm and a leg. So much that there's nothing left for no profits left for the people in New Haven. Solve this problem in 1646. The aldermen of New Haven meet, and they decide to create the New Haven Colony Shipping Company. They're all going to chip in, and they're all going to purchase a ship. And this ship is going to be New Haven's big chance. This is going to be New Haven's chance to go big time. One of the merchants gets up and says, you know, we've got a great harbor in New Haven. It's better than Boston's harbor. We're close to New Amsterdam. We've got a great location. We can be the best seaport in the New World. We should build a great ship. We should build a 150-ton ship and have it be our calling card. When it sails into London, when it sails into Boston, everyone will know that New Haven is in the house. All the other men thought this is a great idea, except for two. One is John Davenport, who's pictured here. He's the fire and brimstone Puritan minister who took this group of colonists from Boston and settled them in New Haven because he thought Boston Puritans weren't strict enough. He gets up at the meeting and says, so you wish to be better than Boston, better than New Amsterdam. That's the sin of envy. You don't want to pay the Boston merchants anymore for shipping. That's the sin of greed. And you want to build a ship that is your emblem. That's the sin of pride. And God will strike down your endeavor from the sky with fire and brimstone and flame if it's based on these sins. Well, John Davenport had been calling fire and brimstone and flames from the sky down on the people of New Haven for 8 years, and they had kind of gotten used to it. So they thanked him, but they moved on. However, the other voice, the other person who objected was someone they had to take seriously. He was an expert. George Lamberton was one of the richest men in New Haven Colony. He was a mysterious, secretive man, lived on a huge farm on the edge of the colony, very close to West Farms. He had a very odd talent for avoiding misfortune. Things that caused other people financial ruin didn't seem to touch him. And there were some whispers about his good luck and where it might have come from and who he might have been dealing with and what he might have been dealing with to keep himself so wealthy when everyone else was struggling. Envy maybe, or who knows, but George Lamberton was the best sailor in New Haven and the only man who could captain a ship to London. And at this meeting, he spoke, and in his quiet, eerie voice, he said, "You're all a bunch of fools. We don't have the money to build a ship of this size. Anything that big is going to be too hard for me to sail, so let's get something we can afford, and let's be successful." Well, everybody's a little afraid of George Lamberton when he says something like this, but one of the merchants said, "You know what, I got a guy in Rhode Island, and he can build this ship for us for what we got." So that becomes the plan. They're going to go to Rhode Island. They're going to have these guys build them a ship. They're going to sail it to London with everything they have. And this voyage is going to get them out from under. It's their big chance because, to be honest with you, New Haven at this point is in so much trouble that they have no way of getting out from under if this voyage doesn't go well. The colony is going to be crippled for years if this voyage doesn't go. This is their shot. So in October of 1646, the ship sailed into New Haven Harbor. John Davenport and George Lamberton were both horrified. The ship was listing to port. The masts were misaligned. It was built out of green timbers, which meant that it was already going to be taking on water. It was an absolute mess. George Lamberton took one look at her and said, "This ship is going to be the grave of all of us." But this is what New Haven had. This was their chance. So in the next couple of months, from when the ship arrived until January 1647, when it was set to sail, the folks in New Haven loaded it up with everything they had to sell: Indian corn, peas, salt cod, beaver pelts, John Davenport's book that he wanted to have published in London. And so at the beginning of 1647, the ship was going to sail back and again be New Haven's big chance. The night before the ship is supposed to sail, Lamberton's sitting in a pub by himself, as always. And some of the townspeople from New Haven came in, and they started to give Lamberton a hard time, just teasing him about the fact that the ship was so poorly built and was he even going to be able to make it to Saybrook, let alone London. And there was a certain amount of envy there, and back and forth goes on, and Lamberton was getting upset. And finally, he stood up in the pub, and he said, "Sail the ship I shall. Home I'll bring her, or to hell will go my soul with the devil." Okay. Next morning, Lamberton and the crew boarded the ship and got ready to set sail. Davenport comes down to Long Wharf and says a prayer over the ship. "God bless this ship and all who sail upon her. But if she sinks, remember that the souls aboard are yours. Save them." A great omen. Lamberton gives the order to hoist the sails, and the harbor's frozen over. Ship is locked in the harbor in ice. So off men and boys go with their rowboats to chip a path through the harbor. And when they finally chip that path through, the ship is towed backward, yet another bad omen, out into the Long Island Sound. It gets down to the end of the sound, turns to port, and disappears into a fog in a morning in January in 1647. Now, months pass, and no one hears anything about the ship. She never makes it to London, not in New Amsterdam, not in Boston. No one has seen her. And the people of New Haven are in despair. First of all, it's their husbands, their sons, their sweethearts, their dads who are manning this ship. And the ship is gone. They know those people are gone too. But even more so, they also realize that this is their big chance and their chance is gone. And now they really don't know what they're going to do next. Well, 1648 rolls around. They've become resigned to the fact that they're always going to be a small colony. West Haven has been settled now. West Farms has people living in it. And there are men down at what became Bradley Point. They're fishing. There are kids gathering mussels and clams for dinner along the coastline, when all of a sudden a thunderstorm comes out of nowhere and rolls into the beach at West Haven. And you've got men in fishing boats rowing to get out of the waves because now all of a sudden the harbor is churning, kids trying to get out of the storm. There's pelt, there's winds, there's lightning bolts. And in the middle of all of this, someone says, look, there's the great ship. And they look out to sea and they can see the great ship. And they can see the men on board fighting with the ship, trying to get her under control because the ship is in trouble. Sails are in tatters. It's 3 sheets to the wind. The ship is listing back and forth. The men are on board frantically trying to pull it. And all of a sudden, the people realize that the ship that they're looking at is not sailing on the water. It's sailing through the sky. Suddenly, there's a lightning bolt. It hits the ship, and the ship keels over and disappears. And when that happens, the storm disappears, and it is suddenly calm. So what did the people of New Haven see? Well, John Davenport was sure that they saw a vision from God. And that vision was a message telling them that all their friends were lost, and it was because of their pride and because of their sin. And probably most of the people in Puritan New Haven believed that. But the people who knew Lamberton well believed something else. They didn't think what they saw was a vision of God. They remembered that George Lamberton had said that he would get that ship back home or the devil would have his soul. And they believed that the ship had gotten caught in a storm sent from Lucifer himself, and that Lamberton had a choice: either send his own soul to hell or stay on that ship through eternity and keep fighting that storm and trying to get it back. And Lamberton decided that he would try to beat the devil. And so for all eternity, those men are trapped on that ship, trapped in that storm and the pouring rain and the rocking winds, desperately trying to get that ship back home and beat the devil. And it said that if you're out Lighthouse Point or over here at Bradley Point in the summertime and a thunderstorm comes up, you'll see George Lamberton and the great ship, and you'll know that he's still out there, still trying to beat the devil.